At Cogleap, we believe that with the right support, every child can thrive. As part of our ongoing support, ongoing commitment to the community, we host monthly expert-led webinars covering intervention strategies, practical family tips, community services, and how to navigate government resources. Our recent events include Dr. Albert Knapp's uh, speech on how to dive into ABA therapy. He's also a clinical psychologist. Our BCBA Nellie Lai led a parent coffee talk on modeling behavior in child development. We're also very honored to invite Jennifer Chang, a well-known education attorney, to discuss advocacy strategies for your child's education. So make sure to check out our website for and subscribe to our newsletter for details of our upcoming events. Now, I believe everybody is eager to learn about our Hope system and how it can transform your child's life. It's my honor to introduce Dr. Crystal Guo, our Director of Research and Development. Dr. Guo holds a Ph.D. in neuroscience from University College London and completed her fellowship at UC Berkeley's Sleep and Neuroimaging Lab. She is an expert in attention, working memory, neurodevelopment, and brain-based AI applications. Let's welcome Dr. Guo for her speech. Welcome. Okay, let me.
Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. So thank you. Thank you, Fiona, for that very wonderful introduction. So I've been so excited for the talk today. I'm talking to you, those who have made the time to show up today for this live event. And I'm also talking to you, the parent who, wants to join, but wasn't able to join live and you're watching the recording. So I'm so glad that you made it. I'm really excited today. We're going to go on a journey. Um, but before we begin, I just wanted to share something also that, Fiona didn't share, which is that I'm also a mother. I have three children, and I'm also a parent to a neurodivergent child. She's not diagnosed, but we've been on this beautiful, wonderful journey just navigating what it means to bring out the best in a neurodivergent mind. And I want to share those insights with you today, along with these neuroscience findings. So I'm going to start sharing my screen and we're going to have a little interaction. For today's agenda, we're going to be talking in four parts. First, I'm going to introduce neurodiversity, and then we're going to dive into the neuroscience of autism and ADHD. And then we'll talk about what Hope Focus System is and how it could really help our neurodivergent kids. Then I'm going to show you some clinical data that we're really excited about. But before we start, I really wanted to check in with you, with all of us here, especially if you're a parent or a caregiver to neurodivergent children. I want to invite you to feel into this moment how you're showing up right now. And if you can, use one word to describe how you're feeling in this moment. And if you feel so moved to, you can share it in the chat room. And if you don't, it doesn't matter. You can just say it to yourself. So thanks for all of those who did share. And I, and thank you for those of us who um, checked in and helped us, create this community. Because at Cognitive Leap and Cogleap Center, we really, really care about building community. So even though today we're doing a psychoeducational talk, the purpose behind this is really to gather our community of parents and clinicians and everyone who has neurodivergent children in their lives so that we can support each other and learn together. So let's start with neurodiversity. What is neurodiversity? Well, it's been thrown around a lot, and sometimes we use it as an umbrella term to refer to children who have neurodevelopmental disorders. But what it really is talking about is neurodiversity is a natural variation in the human brain regarding how we socialize, how we learn, how we pay attention, and how we feel feelings, and as well as other mental functions. And so neuro means the brain, and diversity means variation. And neurodiversity is a really naturally occurring phenomenon. Let's take a look at the ASD and ADHD prevalence in the US. So this is taken from 2020 from the CDC. And 5 years ago, the data shows us that 2.8% of children aged 3 to 17 years old have been diagnosed with ASD. So that's around 2 million children in the US. And the prevalence is much higher for ADHD, 9.8% of children aged 3 to 17 years old. That's approximately 6 million children in the US. When we talk about ADHD and autism, they are distinctly classified as different diagnoses, especially when we look at the DSM and how we do the diagnosis. But for those of us who are familiar with both, we know that there are so many overlapping traits. Just look at this huge list. And so autism and ADHD are not disorders that we have to fix, but they are differences in how the brain processes information. And we're going to really see that today. Scary pictures, don't worry. This is what I want to talk to you about in terms of what level of neurodiversity are we looking at. So there are different biological causes. Our body and our brain are beautiful, wonderful machines. They are so complicated. And there are many causes. So on the genetic level, we can find evidence that shows neurodiversity propensity. And also on the molecular level, so looking at the gut microbiome and as well as the brain cell pathways. But we're not looking at that today. Today, we're going to focus on the neurobiological level. And that's what HFS and Cogleap is all about. We're really looking at parts of the brain that are affected and cause ADHD and ASD and neurodivergent traits. And so let's dive into the neuroscience of autism and ADHD now. That's a very simple, very, very simple neuroscience anatomy class. This is the front of the brain, frontal lobe. This is the back. The purple part is the occipital lobe. It's for vision and visual processing. And this here is a cerebellum. So this here is the cerebellum, and you're going to be hearing about the cerebellum a lot too. And inside, this is kind of the inside of the brain, cut in the middle, and we see something called the basal ganglia. And you're going to hear me talk about that a lot too, because it's very important for dopamine. Mm. So if you've just entered, remember to mute your microphone. So we like to think of the brain as an orchestra. And when we're thinking of an orchestra, there are many sections of the orchestra. You have the winds, you have the brass, you have the strings, but you have to play together in harmony in order for a piece to come together. And here we have the New York Phil, and we have a conductor. Yeah. And who's the conductor of our brain? Really, that's $1 million question. We call it agency, we call it free will, we call it consciousness. Yeah. But the conductor is the one that tells us to how we should move, what we should do, how we're going to make a decision, the person who decides. But if one section of your brain is not playing very well, whether it's because they didn't practice or, they didn't learn their piece very well, then it's going to affect the other part of the orchestra too. And it's going to affect the overall musical piece. So our brain operates in such a similar way. There are different areas of the brain, but they all have to play together in harmony. And we have to ensure that each part of the brain is also working at an optimum state. And so when we look at the neuroscience of autism and ADHD, yes, there are different areas of the brain that are atypical. They're different from the typical brain, but it's also how they are playing together. And this is the very fundamental concept that HFS uses. We are training one area or different areas of the brain, but because they have to play together and because it's so interconnected, that's going to affect the overall behavior, the overall development. So some scientific breakthroughs in autism. You're always going to hear in popular science that, oh, there's so much more that we need to learn about autism. It's like kind of a mystery. We don't really know. But actually, if you dive really deep into the research, you will find that there are starting to have studies where we're identifying biomarkers. We're using brain signatures of children with autism to find out how we can actually even try to attempt to make diagnoses with autism. And so the field of neuroscience is really pushing forward and showing us that we are finding more and more brain signatures to autism. And we are finding more and more evidence of why we see different behavioral symptoms show up. Please remember to mute when you come up. And so new findings are also emphasizing networks and connections rather than individual areas of the brain. So very basic developmental neuroscience of autism. When children with autism are born, in fact, all children, when we're born, we have rapid growth. We have rapid growth of neurons. So it's balloons and just huge growth of brain cells. And then in typical development, what happens is that we start pruning. We start, cutting back. So the things that are really important, we you use it or lose it. We hear this about brain connections all the time, right? So when we're using the brain for things like emotion and sensations, very, very important in infancy. So those pathways keep getting used and those connections stick. But for other areas, for other connections that are not being used, the brain has a way of pruning it back. And this is very efficient for energy to make sure that we're not wasting energy. And what we're seeing is that this doesn't really happen in the autistic brain. In fact, if you measure the brain size, the head circumference of children with autism at 18 months, we see something called megacephaly, which is a larger than normal brain circumference, head circumference. We're also seeing in the whole brain, we have more folding and atypical connectivity. So remember back to that orchestra, right? They're not really playing in sync, or they're not really playing together. It's kind of funky. And we're seeing this atypical synchronicity or atypical connectivity in so many areas of the brain and so many cognitive domains. And it's not just within the whole brain. It's also about how the left brain and the right brain are talking to each other. So specifically, studies are showing us that in the language network, so how we're listening and processing speech and making sounds and language, the left and right brain are not typically developing, not typically communicating with each other. Also for the way that ASD brains are processing touch sensations and movement signals. And also executive function, which is like our attention, reasoning, decision making, as well as how we're feeling into our bodies. All of these functions and the way that the left and right brain are talking to each other show atypical communication. And so how that's showing up for ASD children in movement communication, movement coordination, speech processing, and the way that they're experiencing feelings and sensations. All of these are really challenging. So we're going to take a pause here because every time I'm talking about these atypical developments, I also want you to know that with the same brain signatures that have atypical development, they're the same brain signatures that also can give rise to a lot of the unique, beautiful talents and gifts that we sometimes observe in our neurodivergent kids. And so, yes, I'm talking about challenges, but also bear in mind that they give us gifts also. So the next way in which the ASD brain is atypically developing is in terms of listening and language. And so what we see is that in the auditory cortex, so in this area, this orange part of the brain is processing sound. And it's really connected to the parts here, these red parts, yeah, and as well as this brown part, speech. You see the speech. And so the way that we hear sounds enters our brain and it enters through our ears and then it gets processed in this orange area. And then it then communicates. This orange area talks to this red area and also this brown area to determine how we're understanding speech and how we're going to then communicate back. What we're finding in ASD brains is that you can see here in this figure, this area is the part of the brain that is different for ASD brains versus typically developing. And that matches here, right? So you see this little bit here, that's the orange bit, that's the auditory processing area. And this patch here, which is the language comprehension. And so what does that mean? That means that in the ASD brain, there is atypical development and functioning in the way that they're hearing things and then the way that they're understanding speech. Sometimes we think of ASD children as not being able to communicate, right? But if you think about it, if you can't process sounds properly and you can't understand speech properly, then it naturally makes it very difficult for you to communicate, for you to speak and interact properly. So I'm trying to show you the underlying causes of some of these symptoms that we see. For the ASD child, difficulties with auditory processing, it affects speech understanding, and especially in noisy environments where they can't hear properly. The next area we're going to talk about where ASD as well as ADHD brains have atypical development is the way that they process sensations and feelings. So we're finding that in the somatosensory cortex, so that's the part of the brain that is responsible for, for processing touch, temperature, pain, and our body sensations. And what's happening in those brain cells is that they are getting too much or too little signal. We call this gating. So imagine, you're trying to get into like a bar or a club and there's like a bouncer in front, right? And this bouncer is very temperamental. He's either going to let everybody through or he's going to not let anyone through. And in some ways, that's how the ASD brain is processing touch and sensations and all of these bits of information. It's either too much or too little. And also we're seeing that, ASD children, sometimes they can't get used to sensations. We call this habituation because it's always going to feel as intense as the first time. Another area that's really important is something called the insula. And you don't have to remember this name, but what I would like to impress upon you is that the way that our brains process emotions and feel emotions and the way we regulate emotions has a lot to do with the ability of our bodies and us to register how we're feeling from the inside. And so these areas of the brain that also process fear, that also process how our internal body states are feeling, also show atypical development in the ASD and ADHD brain. So what does that look like for autistic kids? In the ASD child, we see difficulties with emotional regulation and sensory integration. And especially with ADHD kids, we see a lot of emotional regulation struggling, impulsivity, something we call, sensitivity and rejection dysphoria, what that means that they have a really high level of baseline anxiety as well. So the next area where ASD and ADHD brains show atypical development also is in movement control. Okay, so the way that our brains process information to help us make voluntary movements, like walking, throwing a ball, kicking a ball, like giving a high five, planning movements, like how do I put on this jacket on me? And sensory cortex as well, so feeling sensations across the body, as well as how these areas of the brain that process movement and feelings are talking to the front of our brain, how to plan that, what does it mean? Like just kind of decision makings that have to do with movement and feelings. What we're seeing here on the right side is something that, for those of us in science, we take it for granted. But this is a slice of the brain. So this is the outside, the outer edge. This is the inside. So this is half a slice of the brain. And this is called the homunculus. And it's basically a map. It's a map of the brain where for the areas of the brain that control movement and also process sensations, there are different areas that correspond to different parts of the body. And I kid you not, if I take like a transcranial magnetic stimulator and I zap you, like say I zap you on the leg area, yeah, your leg is gonna twitch, it's gonna fly out, or it's gonna, kick someone by accident. And in the ASD brain or ADHD brain, yes, we have atypical development in the motor cortex or the somatosensory cortex, but it's also different for every child. So for some children, it may be the whole body. For some children, it may be this side on the left side is not really talking to the right side. So you have left-right coordination difficulties. Yeah. And some people have more dexterity challenges. So that would be like on the hand area. A special shout out to the area called the cerebellum. I said that I'm going to be talking about this area because it's so important in modern neuroscience, where we're seeing that again and again in the ASD and the ADHD brain, the cerebellum is always popping up when we look at differences between them and typically developing brains. And what we're seeing is that, way back when, to me, it's way back when, the cerebellum used to be thought of as, oh, it's like the part of the brain that processes movement, coordination, motor planning. But actually, what the cerebellum is doing is it's connecting to all these other areas of the brain. It is so important. And in fact, it even plays a role in social and affect, which is emotional processing. So this is a part of this is like a slice of the cerebellum, and this is looking at cerebellar circuits in autism. So what this means is, how is the cerebellum, playing its violin or playing in symphony, in synchrony with the other parts of the brain? And what we're seeing is that, wow, it plays together with so many parts of the brain. And in the autism brain, as well as the ADHD brain, not only are some structures in the cerebellum very different, the way that they're talking to these other areas is also very different from the typical brain. And so how are they different? In terms of emotional processing, social cues, dealing with, your mood and irritability, repetitive behaviors, how we're controlling our emotions and bodies, and language, social again, face processing, imitation. So, wow, we're seeing all of this evidence in neuroscience where the cerebellum, very important for movement and motion control, also very involved in all of these aspects of behavior that we see on the surface when we're dealing and interacting with neurodivergent kids. And so why am I showing you at this level? Because if we know this from science already, it is absolutely important that our interventions are catching up to this level of science. If we know that the brains of neurodivergent kids are atypical in all these ways, then our intervention must be targeting these brain circuits and brain areas. That's the way that we make it really efficient. So remember in the orchestra, right? We're really targeting the areas, the cellist who didn't practice enough, or the flutist who never got the right lessons growing up. We're giving them those remedial lessons. I know that some of our parents listening and watching have also are caregivers to ADHD children. So I also want to talk a little bit about the ADHD brain. And again, we're seeing it's not just about individual areas, but about networks, about how different areas are talking to each other. And especially in the ADHD brain, it's so much about dopamine pathways. So dopamine we know is a neurotransmitter. Dopamine is big big, really important for drive, motivation, reward processing. And so we see atypical development in all of these different dopamine pathways and networks. And that is one of the big reasons why we see this behavioral symptoms of inattention, difficulty with focusing, difficulty planning, executive function, and also, not being able to sit still, not being able to like inhibit your impulse to move. So much of that has to do with the atypical development of dopamine pathways. Don't worry about this brain. All this is to illustrate to you, wow, these are some very, very complicated networks of how attention is processed in the brain and how the ADHD brain is different from the typical brain in all of these different networks, five different networks. Okay. So again, we're talking about this orchestra and how they're playing together. What you're seeing here is the pyramid of cognitive development. We talked about so many different cognitive skills, so many different brain areas. It's all jumble. But actually, we can organize it in this pyramid. So this pyramid follows from the bottom to the top. You see in the very bottom, it's motor and sensory processing. And from infancy, those are some of the first skills that, first areas of the brain that are developing. And as we get older, we start building, like eye contact and like emotional cues. And then later on, language and communication. Then later on, executive function, attention. And as we get older, we have math and reasoning, things like learning. And so what HFS is really doing is we're really trying to focus on this on the base of the pyramid, because we know that if we're only focusing on this, if we're only focusing on the symptoms or the behaviors that we really want to change, but we're not looking at this part as well, then it's not really going to work. It's going to keep going back to, the challenging behaviors because we're not helping them play together very well. So we need to help the areas that didn't get the typical development when they were growing up. We need to retrain them. We need to give them another chance to, fulfill their potential so that the whole brain together as a symphony, they can play a beautiful piece together. So let's now dive into the Hope Focus System, HFS. This is an intervention that we're so excited about because it's very, very different from a lot of what we see, but it's so plugged into the science that we know and the latest science that we know about the brains of ASD and ADHD. So what is HFS? Hope Focus System is a drug-free intervention for children with ASD and ADHD, but also in our centers, we get a lot of children who are not necessarily diagnosed, but have a lot of overlapping traits. And we see, vast improvements with them too. HFS combines skill-based exercises with music listening therapy, and we're always using strength-based strategies. So I'll tell you more about these things later one by one. And our intervention process targets key brain areas that we talked about just now. And we see a lot of improvements in physical and mental focus, social communication skills, and emotional regulation. And our data, our clinical data will show you this later. Why HFS? Right? Why HFS? Again, we talked about, etiology focus. Etiology means like what's causing it? What's causing autism and ADHD? What's causing the behaviors and the symptoms that we are finding challenging and we want to improve? So HFS is really focused on the causes, the underlying brain functions that cause symptoms and drive behavior and learning. And so this becomes longer lasting because we're really leveraging neuroplasticity. Traditional therapies are really good for specific symptoms, but they also tend to be symptom focused. Again, HFS stimulates key brain areas for development. And so now after, the section on the neuroscience, these areas start to sound and feel more familiar to you, right? We see that in studies and research that they are again and again implicated in how ASD and ADHD brains are atypically developing. And so we have different core therapeutic components in HFS. The first is movement-based strategy. So why movement? Because physical activity boosts dopamine and it improves focus and mood, but also it's targeting all of those motor, sensory motor, and cerebellar areas of the brain that we talked about. Music listening therapy. So why music? Music is engaging multiple brain areas, including the auditory cortex, listening, and the language areas. And so this in turn helps children to then have better speech, language, and it also enhances their memory, attention, and their emotional regulation. We talk a lot about strength-based strategy. So what is that? We're focusing on the child's strength to build confidence and motivation. And lastly, we're putting all of this together. All of these are, already proven methods with like very high efficacy. We have so much evidence to show that in research, but we're really putting it together in a very highly sophisticated and systematic way so that we're meeting the child where they are today because, it's different every day. It's contextual, it's social, it's relational. And we're using smart systems to put a lot of data together to calculate and to deliver just the right level of intervention and training. So to dive a little bit deeper into strength-based approach, this is lovely Dr. Ned Hallowell. He always has this beautiful smile on his face, and he's the pioneer of strength-based approach for neurodivergent children. He's a New York Times bestseller, a Harvard-educated and psychiatrist. He's been on national TV. But what I really love about Dr. Hallowell, and he's also our co-founder for Cogleap, what I really love about him is that he always has this sunny, like very realistic, but also very positive attitude towards how we interact with neurodivergent kids. So let's look at this beautiful quote here. Strength-based treatment. Our strength-based approach to treatment focus on interests and talents that already exist within you. When you start with the positive, it's much easier to work on the aspects of yourself that are more challenging. A positive mindset brings in feelings of hope, enthusiasm, excitement, and interest. That motivates change and feeling. Let's take that in a little bit. Yeah. Because when we're talking about change and healing, we have methods. We have so many methods. But the children that we're working with, they're human beings. They have feelings. Yeah. And they have their own directions and their own thoughts and challenges. And so we are using strength-based approach. We're bringing in hope. We're bringing in enthusiasm and excitement. We have a near zero dropout rate. It's unbelievable because we're really starting from the strength-based approach. And our children, love coming for our practices, for our interventions. This is a framework that Dr. Hallwell came up with, and we follow it like so closely because it's very, very powerful, starting with connection. We connect with the child. And then this brings trust and feelings of security. It brings them from really depressed and unaccepted to feeling, seen. And then we bring in the element of play. We don't make it really boring. In fact, we make it very playful and they like it. We meet them where they are. We're always trying to understand, like, is this boring to you? Is this too hard? Is this too challenging? Is it challenging enough? Is it too easy? And then we bring in the practice. So as children do what they like and they're really into it, they're motivated and they're starting to practice, this leads to mastery. This leads to a mastery that they decided to do on their own, not because someone is pushing them, not because someone is shaming them. And with that mastery, they're feeling, I can do this. I am not the, like the down in the dumps. I'm not the dumb person that, my daughter said to me yesterday, like, I'm dumb. I'm like, no, you're not dumb. And when they feel this sense of mastery, then they are getting a validation. They're giving themselves validation. Yes, they are feeling external validation as well. But more importantly, this validation is coming from within, and they feel more connected to themselves and to the world around them. And hence we have this really positive cycle of excellence. Our HFS coaches go through APA accredited training so that they know how to connect and they know how to interact with neurodivergent children. They're trained with Dr. Hallowell's philosophy and methods. And so the coach is really, the person that is with our children with every session. And they become like a good friend. They become a source of comfort and connection and helps them encourage to build confidence. The other therapeutic element we talked about is the skill-based movement exercises. So now we're really talking about inducing the brain changes. Yeah. And we have 9 skill categories: breathing, balance, core strength, hand-eye coordination. We're crossing the midline, and body coordination, dexterity, flexibility, and aerobic endurance. So we're engaging all these different muscle groups, joints, musculoskeletal structures. And these categories of movements, they can improve these lower level as well as higher level cognitive challenges. And so we have almost 1,800 different options, 9 categories, 20 different levels, 10 exercises per category, different difficulty levels. This is not something that, like, even a very intelligent person, maybe like an exceptionally, talented genius, but your average human being is not going to be able to like remember all of these 1,800 different options and then tweak and like do these calculations on the fly. And so this is why we build an intelligent system, because the algorithm or a computer can do that. It can do that with high accuracy, tracking the improvements, tracking the changes, and giving feedback, all sorts of different data to calculate and make a decision. Today, you're going to be doing these exercises at this difficulty level because of these different reasons. And so again, I mentioned we have so many papers, so much research already that shows that movement-based intervention for ADHD and ADHD is very effective. And we also have music listening therapy. Remember, we talked about the way that the auditory processing system in ADHD brains are a little bit different. And so this is why we are targeting the auditory system in order to stimulate also the language and speech processing areas. Again, a lot of evidence. And lastly, we have very personalized intervention plans. They start with detailed assessments. I'm just giving you, a brief look at our reporting system. So parents get these, very detailed reports that we can track their progress, and it explains to them exactly what is going on because every child is different and we want to know exactly which part of their cognitive system needs help. And so we also monitor transition behaviors and mental statuses, and we have a huge amount of data that's being collected and calculated and shown. So last year, we were invited by Stanford to present our clinical data and present HFS as a very novel, but also, very effective intervention for autism. And so I'm going to show you this clinical data very briefly to impress you. And we took a sample of 58 children with ADHD and autism and other neurodevelopmental disorders. And they had done altogether, almost 1,900 hours of intervention hours. And what we're seeing is that after an average of 40 HFS sessions, so 40 sessions, which is an hour per session, we're seeing these beautiful decreases in difficulty and challenges. So they started off with, a lot of difficulties in attention and focus, hyperactivity, concept of time, communication, emotional regulation. And after 40 sessions, we see these significant decreases in the difficulties and the challenges that the children are experiencing. We're also zooming in on attention skills. So after an average of 50 HFS sessions, we're seeing these very significant increases in focus and accuracy, significant decreases in errors, mistakes due to inattention. We're also seeing the same improvements in how children are able to maintain, their physical stillness and inhibit impulsivity as well after 50 HFS sessions. So we're coming to the end and some closing remarks. I hope that you can walk away with, even just a little bit of understanding of the brain differences that impact focus and behavior and learning in our neurodivergent children. And it's so much to do with how their brains have developed. It's not that they are choosing, or it's not that they, like are not willing to, and they themselves hardly sometimes have much control over it in some areas. And so we really have to take care of their brain. And so HFS cognitive training is really targeting these key brain areas to enhance focus and their self-regulation. And our evidence-based approach, we integrate movement, music, and strength-based strategies for holistic growth. So thank you for your time. We're going to switch over now because we have some case studies and testimonials from our parents that we really want to share with you for the parents and the caregivers who are listening as well.
Thank you, Dr. Gao, for such a clear and inspiring presentation. I'm sure many parents now have a deeper understanding of how their child's brain works and are feeling much more empowered to embrace their child's neurodiversity and with greater confidence and compassion. So before we head into our Q&A session, I'd like to invite Yuna and two parents to share their successful stories. So Yuna is our supervising trainer, and she has helped dozens of children with autism and ADHD make incredible progress through our Hope Focus system. And today, she's here to share her insights and inspiring stories. Yuna, thank you for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to share my experiences with you guys.
Yeah, it seems that you just finished a session with a kid, right? You're
Yes, I
still
just
in the
did.
center.
Yes, I'm still in the
Okay.
center.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time. So, let's start with a little bit about you. And can you tell us what you do at Cogleap and what brought you into this work?
I'm a supervising trainer at Cogleap, and before joining Cogleap, I was a teacher for over 10 years. I really loved working with the children, but I want to make a deeper impact, especially for kids who often don't fit into the traditional classroom setting. Over the past 2 years, I've spent over 1,268 hours working directly with more than 50 children who has autism and ADHD, and it's been one of the most rewarding experiences of my life.
That's amazing. So, in your mind, what makes HFS program at Cogleap different from other interventions like ABAs?
Well, that's a great question. HFS is stress-based and rooted in Dr. Holloway's cycle of excellence, and that's with connection and play, practice, mystery, and validation. Many of our children come to us after feeling discouraged. They've experienced failure or lack of recognition in school. Our goal is to rebuild their confidence, connecting with them emotionally, and then gradually guiding them to take on challenges in a way that feels safe and encouraging.
Yeah, I think Dr. Gall also mentioned the cycle of excellence, and you are the person who practice it and
Yes,
yeah, make it happen to the kids. Okay, so that framework really drives the whole experience, right? Do you have any
exactly.
like
Yeah.
successful stories?
Yes. Well, connection comes first. Without that, nothing else works. But once a child feels safe and seen, they're much more open to engaging, learning, and growing. Um, well, the story I want to share is the boy. His name is Aaron, and he's 10 years old. He come to us after his parents tried ABA therapy, and it felt it didn't work too much for him. They were like hesitant, like before they try our HFS training, so they only sign up for 24 sections. That's kind of like a trial run. When he started, he refused to participate in anything. Like he's always often said like, I can't do it. This is too hard. Or like he will find an excuse that like, oh, my arm is hurt, my leg is hurt. And but instead of like pushing him, our trainers like acknowledge his feelings, made small adjustment and gently encourage him. We pressed every like tiny effort for him slowly, and he began to try. And by the 24th session, he was engaging confidently, and his parents were so happy. So they extended his training. By he finished the section 40, and then the change was incredible. And he was more outgoing, confident, and proud of what he could do. And not only parents and our team say he's improving. We have a very professional report also show it's improving. So that was a big win, I think.
Yeah, that's such a powerful story. So, what's the key factor that you think contribute to his success?
The key factors in this success it's our extensive database, and we have over 1,000 activities. So if a child dislike a particular task, our system can easily swap it out for something else, and ensure each child get a personalized experiences that keep them engaging and motivated.
That's amazing. So, have you also worked with children who struggle with ADHD?
Yes. Yes. I can give you example. Like one child I worked with was very impulsive and then constantly running, jumping, clapping on the door, and she had that um habit she like to bite things when she getting stressful, and when we before the session and we prepared a lot of balloons and then for that session, and then she like to bite them and then she like to pop all of the balloons. So sometimes like we don't even have a balloon like before like begin the class, and then that was like a big headache for us. To help her, we focus on building focus and emotional regulation. We gradually increase task duration and give her prize for each success. We also use bone conduct headphone. I have one that I can show you. It's like this. So you can put it on your ear. Sorry, I only have one hand. My other hand is holding the phone. So it's like this. So you don't need to put it inside your ear hole, just before the ear on the soft bone. Yeah, and then we also have we also play the music in different frequencies, and it helps calm her nerve system and improve her focus. Over time, we noticed that she slowed down, and she become more emotionally stable, and then she finally can sit down and listen to the parents and teachers, so that she can hear what the teachers direction, and she can follow the parents instruction. And that was, yeah, that was very, very good for her. And then everybody was proud of for her, and then we thinking that's, yeah, yeah, a big success.
Yeah, a big win for
Yeah,
everybody.
yeah.
Okay, so besides training kids directly, you also have other responsibilities as a supervising trainer. So can you share some of those with us?
Yes. We have a weekly team meeting, and we're trainers share update on each child's progress. So we discuss what's working or what need to adjusting, and brainstorming new strategy together. So it's a true team effort. So I'm not working by myself, or I work as a team, and we're all committed to help every child succeed.
Okay, yeah, that a team will definitely work better than just an individual. Okay, many parents here may be feeling overwhelmed or unsure if this kind of training will work for their kids, right? So what would you say to them?
Well, I completely understand those feelings, and many families come to us after trying other things, like a ton of things, but it didn't work. So, but I have seen again and again the children can change. So, especially if we catch them during the critical brain development, and with the right support, they can build focus, confidence, and emotional control.
Thank you, Yuna, for sharing those inspiring stories, and your passion and the dedication truly shine through. And we are so lucky to have you on the Cogleap team. Thank you.
And thank you. Thank you. Thank you for all the parents and for your trust. We will support every step on the way.
Okay. So now we'd like to move into one of the most powerful parts of today's workshop, hearing from parents who walked this path themselves. So it's one thing to hear from professionals like Crystal or Yuna, but it's truly inspiring to learn from those who've just experienced the ups and downs and the breakthroughs and the fears firsthand. So we are very lucky to have two incredible moms with us today. So, Cecilia, would you like to would you like to briefly introduce yourself and your son?
Sure, of course. I'm Cecilia. My son Evan is 12. He is on the spectrum. He's a very lovely boy. He loves great food and navigating on freeways. So we all adore him.
Sounds good. So, I'd like to also introduce Sophie. Sophie, are you here?
Yeah,
Say
here.
hi to all of us. Okay, so
Hi.
can you also, yeah, you came all the way from England to the US and to support your daughter, Rebecca. So thank you for being here. Could you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and Rebecca?
Hi, I'm Sophie. My daughter Rebecca, she's 9 years old. She diagnosed as autism when she was 4. And so we decided move to US because for her better support. I believe I can find better support for her.
Okay, sounds inspiring. So thank you both. Let's dive into your journey. Before joining HFS, what were some of the biggest challenges you were facing? Start with Cecilia.
Yeah, for us, the toughest time was during and after the pandemic. Evan had major developmental setbacks. Uh, for example, he often ignored our instructions and talking nonstop and eloped constantly from school. So we were constantly stressed to get daily calls from his teachers and the school psychologist.
Okay, I can feel your struggles. How about Sophie?
Yeah, 2 years ago, Rebecca started her kind of behavioral problem because some friendship issue. And after that, she started to become very shut down and become negative, and she didn't want to go to the playground and didn't want to make a play day anymore. So at school side, she tend to be very like close and anyway, it's just like everything just goes down and give a lot of pressure to our family. We can't find any solution. So it seems no hope. So yeah, it's quite stressful.
Okay, yeah, it does sound stressful. So how did you hear about us? Like how did you hear about HFS and what made you decide to try HFS?
I may go first. Actually, a friend of mine told me about a seminar organized by Cogleap. So that's the first time I heard about HSF, HFS, and I also during the seminar I heard the parents share their successful stories, and I was very impressed. And Rose, the community relations director, encouraged me to enroll Evan into HFS program, saying that the early developmental, the brain development was the key. So her encouragement really stuck with me.
Okay, yeah. So how about Sophie?
Yeah, my one of my trustworthy friends, she recommended yeah you to me, and she's kind of before her major is kind of biology, chemical something, and she said your theory is based on the neuroplasticity, and I heard that in a BBC program, it's a documentary, and it called the Rebuild the Neuroplasticity can 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 reshape the neural system. So that give me kind of, oh, I'm really surprised there's a thing like that, because I always think Rebecca is kind of neural complex. The reason is comes from neural complex. So I would say I would love to try.
Yeah, it seems that both of you were recommended by some great friends and they did a great job being a friend. Okay, so were there any hesitations before joining the program?
Yeah, definitely. At the beginning, I didn't think Evan would be able to adapt. So when I signed a contract with Cogleap, with Rose, we even included a contingency clause into our contract in case Evan couldn't cooperate. That gave me peace of mind.
Okay, how about Sophie?
I think because I'm not quite sure, because every child is different. I'm not sure if it works for Rebecca, but I would like to try, but nothing lose. And so yeah, I'm happy I tried.
Yeah. Okay. So, what will your child's first session look like? And did they struggle in the beginning?
Oh, yeah, totally. For Evan, he constantly eloped from the classroom in his first session, just as what he did at school. He wouldn't cooperate with Claire, his one-on-one coach. It was a very tough start.
Yeah, definitely. How about Sophie?
Yeah, it's not very, it went not very smoothly because Rebecca constantly elope and she like kind of a lot of behavioral problem like spitting, hitting, biting. But Yuna is very patient and so she kind of keep trying, and eventually she's become a calmer and calmer. So and she get when they she made connection with you now, like build up the good relationship, then everything went right.
Yeah, I can totally relate. I still remember that one time Rebecca eloped and came to another room and there was a piano and she started to playing piano. Oh, yeah, okay. Those moments. Okay. So how did the coaches help them adjust?
For Evan, his coach Claire is really amazing. I like to say, Evan needs to bond emotionally with someone before he can actually listen. Just as Yuna just said, it's connection. Connection matters. So, and Claire was so patient and nurturing. She is very motherly. One day, Evan said that his head hurt, and Claire gave him a massage throughout the session. That's when their connection really began.
Okay, yeah, Claire is really our super trainers. Yeah. Sophie?
Yes, I think the most important is Yuna help Rebecca build a connection with her, and so once the connection worked, and then they can start to communicate, and then so build up trust. And so once children trust somebody, then when they feel safe, then yeah, it just goes well.
Yeah, so you are both talking about the cycle of excellence and the strength-based approach that feels safe, make them
Connection.
feel safe. Yeah.
Mm.
Okay. And encouraged. Okay, so what changes did you start noticing?
For Evan can now complete an entire 1 hour session. It was a huge surprise to me. He stopped eloping and now can follow multiple step directions at school and at home.
Okay, sounds promising. Yeah. Sophie?
For Rebecca, because she's very energetic and she's very active, and for her, but most important for me is she's getting have positive attitude towards parents and towards people around her, and yeah, I think that's the most important, and she become and her motor skill is improved hugely. And because before she can't kind of catch ball, and now she can do different type of ball catching. So it seems her motor skill developed very good through the activities. Yeah, and she start to trust the people, and she become kind of, because she's quite negative and passive, but now she's kind of more positive and have a kind of good attitude towards other people. That's a significant change.
Oh, yeah. I think every mother, every parent wants to see that kind of changes in their child. So, was there a specific moment that when you realized, oh, HFS was really helping?
Yes, definitely. For Evan, it was at his annual IEP meeting. His teacher said that most of his IEP goals were marked met, and that was a huge moment for us.
Wow. Okay. How about Sophie?
Yeah, school meeting. We just because enrolled the school here about 2 months, but teacher has said me recently she can sit down for or more than half hour, sit quietly to finish her task. It's really surprised me.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So if you'd like to give one piece of advice to the parents who are in your same shoes, what would that be?
I think we should trust professionals. I was hesitant, but I'm so glad that I took that step. and don't let any doubt hold you back.
Yeah, Sophie?
I think if you want to give your child a chance to improve, to change, just come to try. Yeah, you won't lose.
Yeah, definitely. So now your kids are still doing HFS training, right? And what does the future look like, your child, if you continue doing it?
Well, I hope Evan will need less assistance over time. And I've seen how much progress he's already made, and I'm feeling hopeful again.
Okay. That's a great wish. Yeah, great hope. That's great hope. Yeah, okay. How about Sophie?
Yeah, I think I will carry on the HF training because they give the positive feedback and everything seems going right. And yeah, I will carry on. It's good. I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, yeah. So we've seen many successful stories in our center, like a grandma who came a long way from China to here and saw her grandson make a huge difference after like half a years of training. So we've witnessed those improvements, and thank you both of you for sharing your inspiring stories with our parents. I
My,
believe your stories will help them make more informed decisions. Thank you.
thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah. So let's go back to Dr. Gall. If you have any questions, feel free to type in the chat or just unmute yourself and ask Dr. Gall. Now it's the Q&A session. So yeah, don't hesitate.
I am also replying some of your questions in the chat.
Okay. Yeah, Dr. Go is a mother of 3 kids. Oh, I think somebody asked like, can you show a song of songs, music, and analyze how the music therapy work?
Yeah, so we have a friend here who wants to understand a little bit more about the music therapy. That's a really great question. So our music is what we call frequency filtered. So I'm going to dive a little bit into the parts of our brain that process sound. So we have something called the tonotopic map, and it's basically a map in the brain, and each part of this map is responsible for different tunes and frequency of sound. So if I go, ooh, so it's going to activate one area of your auditory system. And if I go, ah, then that's going to activate a different area. And so what we know is that in that auditory area, there's a map that has different frequency sensitivities. And also these project to different areas of the brain. And that's how the auditory system is built. And so the way that we're delivering the music is not just random. We have specific frequencies of engineered music that then are specifically targeting known projections to different brain areas. So roughly that's how the mechanism works. And can I show you the music? I don't have the music with me like to play right now, but maybe Yuna, if she's still around, we take a lot of classical music and then it's filtered in that way.
Yeah, they're basically classic music. Others have any questions? That's your chance to ask Dr. Gall. Yeah.
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
So one of the slides is a pyramid explain the basic skill to the higher level skill. Like fine motor skill is the basic, and then comprehension language. at the top, right? So how does that pyramid, that chart correlate with the curriculum design?
So that's a great question. Let me go back to that. So you're talking about the slide, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what you're seeing here, actually, these are all different areas of cognitive development that we assess each child for. So we have something called the FAS, or Fundamental Ability Survey, and it's a like a long assessment that has over 100 questions, but it's very comprehensive. It's also divided by age range and by gender. And so when our children take this assessment, and it's filled in by the parents, so you're observing your child's behavior and you're filling it accordingly, then we have this, the results of all of these different areas of cognitive function. And so what's happening in our intelligence system, in the, underneath the hood, is that for all of these, each of these different areas of cognitive functioning, we are matching them to different types of exercises. And also the scores that you get from this assessment is also matched to different music programs that we're delivering. So let me give you a really example. Let's go back to this page here because this is a perfect example page. Okay, so we're seeing here that this is the fine motor skills, right? So what happens is that you took the FAS, and in the domain of fine motor skills, you scored, at this level, right? So this is the most severe, this is the least severe, and you scored at about 0.9. So the performance in this dimension is classified as severe impairment. So what does that mean? What does that mean is that we're looking at how is fine motor skills, like how is it showing up in ASD as well as in ADHD? And we're also looking at the functional brain regions that are implicated in fine motor control. And knowing that it is these areas, we are also matching it to the type or category of exercise that is needed in order to target these brain areas as well as to improve that cognitive skill. So for this child who's scoring at this level of fine motor skills, we're going to be customizing the intervention so that they're doing more dexterity exercises and more hand-eye coordination exercises in that way. So let's go back to the pyramid. So does that answer your question in some way, or do you want to follow up?
So does this pyramid mean you have to kind of master the bottom one in order to move up, or they can develop?
Yeah,
not in
so
sequential way?
it's the latter. So let's give an example, okay? Like let's take the profile of, say, an ADHD child, and they're having a lot of difficulty focusing and paying attention in class, right? And so the very natural reaction to take is, okay, we're going to train them to focus. We're going to do like, attention training exercises. And you're finding that, like, okay, attention training exercises are working in some way, but only in certain situations, right? Or only like to a certain degree. And then you're going to have to keep training them. And then a different type of distraction comes up, and then they get distracted again. What we're doing is that we're saying the way that attention is being challenged in a child with ADHD is not just because of the areas of the brain that have attention deficit. It's also because of areas of the brain that have to do with motor control. This sounds crazy, but this is what the science is showing us. The cerebellum, the motor areas, the basal ganglia, which is very important also for movement and body, all of those have to do with dopamine. And the areas of the brain that are controlling these skills are directly connected to the area of the brain that control these skills. So they're actually connected, very connected. And so we are training these skills in order to improve these skills. And when we do that, we're inducing brain changes. We're increasing the connectivity between these known brain networks that are impaired in ADHD children. And by working on this, you're creating a sort of more foundational, more fundamental, and more lasting change so that their attention skills are fundamentally being improved, whether it's in this context or that context, whether they're in school or at home, whether they're doing math or they're listening, whether it's to do with their body impulsivity in this way. So it's not just symptom, it's not just targeting the behavior, it's targeting the underlying root cause of that behavior. Does that help with answering your question a bit more?
Yeah, thank you.
I think there's some questions in the chat. Yeah.
I also want to talk directly to those of us who are watching the recording afterwards. You can slide into our DMs on IG. You can message us on Facebook. You can even message us on LinkedIn if you have any questions after watching this, or if you want to give any feedback. We also have a great presence on YouTube. We have great videos you can check out. If you are also Chinese speaking, we're on Xiaohongshu. So go and look at our social media as well.
There are some questions in the chat.
Let's see this. Yeah, so about regulating chocolate, tea, coffee, caffeine, will it help with cognitive and brain function? Definitely. So, the half-life of caffeine is around 6 hours. So if you're drinking coffee at, 6 a.m., it's going to be out of your system at 12 noon. But if you're drinking at 10, then by 4 o'clock, you still have half the amount of caffeine in your body. And sleep is absolutely, absolutely important. It's kind of all one big connected thing, right? If you're exercising, you're going to be sleeping better. If you're not sleeping well, you're going to feel so tired, and then you're not going to want to exercise, or you're not going to be able to focus. So we have to target all of these areas all together. I know it's really hard as parents and as busy parents, and if you're a caregiver of a neurodivergent kid, but it's just to keep in mind. Exercise, sleep, nutrition, also our mental well-being. So how happy we are, how well we're communicating with each other, how we're talking to ourselves.
Yeah, I think
I'm just reading some of the, okay. So when the ADHD kids can't get what they want, having temper tantrums, emotional regulation, how can we help our child to calm down? So this is such a good question. How many of us have children who have meltdowns, from 0 to 200, and just big feelings, right? We call them big feeling kids or deeply feeling kids. First of all, as a parent, I would say that the most important thing is that we also stay calm. And I know that that's sometimes really, really hard. I also don't always stay calm, but in the moments that we can stay calm, there are many different techniques that we can do, right? It depends what is triggering it. So if there is something that is triggering that meltdown, first we can remove them from that environment, right? And then when a child is in the so-called tantrum, but they're in a fight or flight mode. Their nervous system is totally hijacked. So no amount of talking or logical speaking at that moment is that effective. What we have to do is help their bodies calm down, because children are feeling with their bodies. They're living really through their bodies. So there are many things we can do. We can do hugs. If they don't want to be touched, we can do breathing exercises, just breathing with them, deep breath. If they can't do that also, we have the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So name 5 things around you. So you're bringing them away from their, like closed in, really, really high tech nervous system to outside. Okay, name 5 things that you see: a book, a lamp, tissue paper, a clock, my hair tie. And then we do 4 things. Name 4 things that you are wearing right now or that you can feel. And then 3, and then 2, and 1. And you can, play around with this, whatever you want. The point is to allow them to focus on their environment, coming back to the here and now. We can also, when they're not in a hijack state, so when they're not crying, when they're not, out of control of their emotions, that's the time where we check in with them. We say, hey, remember what happened? We have some really big feelings. And also, that's also the time where we can say to them, hey, let's try an exercise of feeling into our bodies and naming our body feelings, right? So I feel hot. I feel tight. Sometimes my daughter will say, oh, my leg is wobbling. I feel like my leg just wants to wobble. Or my heart is pounding a lot, right? And we teach the children, as well as adults have to learn this too, how to give labels and names to the feelings and emotions that we're experiencing. And this helps them externalize it. Let's help them recognize it. And you'll find that sometimes just naming something and just pointing it out is enough to bring it down that little level that parent and child are also able to calm down. And now if you have siblings at home, that's a totally different story too, right? Because it can set up a chain reaction. And so I always bring the activated child into a different space, or we separate them as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Crystal, for answering all those questions. I think one question asked, can I have a copy of the slides, especially the pyramid of cognitive development? Yes, we will send the recording as well as the slides to all the emails that you sign up for the events. So yeah, just keep an eye on it. I think it's already 8:27. It's getting late. Thank you for all of us. Thank you all of us for joining our meeting tonight. And if you are interested in learn more about our HFS cognitive training, you just please submit an inquiry form on our website, or call us, or send us an email to our customer service email. So I think Nico has put the information in the chat. Please take a screenshot of the information if you are interested and reach out. Thank you for joining today's session. I wish everyone have a good night. Thank you. Bye.